Babylon, a city that became a legend long before we truly understood what it really was. For thousands of years, people spoke about it as a place of unimaginable wealth, towering structures, and human ambition pushed to its limits. A city so grand that it blurred the line between history and myth. But here's the paradox. How can a city become legendary before its real story is even known? To answer that, we have to go back nearly 4,000 years. The earliest known references to Babylon appear around the 23rd century BCE, during the time of Sargon of Akkad, one of the first great empire builders in human history. Back then, Babylon was not yet the center of power. It was just a small and relatively unimportant city. It wasn't even called Babylon. In the Sumerian language, it was known as Kadinger, the city of God. Later, the Akkadians gave it a new name, Babili, meaning gate of the gods. Over time, that name would evolve into Babylon. But at this point in history, there was nothing legendary about it. No massive walls, no great kings, no wonders of the world. Just a small city waiting for its moment. And that moment would come after the fall of the Sumerian Akkadian world. Everything changed after the collapse of the Sumerian Akkadian world around 2000 BCE. What was once a powerful and unified region fell into chaos. Cities turned into rival states. Former allies became enemies. Across Mesopotamia, new powers began to rise, each fighting for control, each trying to survive. Among them were the Amorites, nomadic tribes from the west, often seen as outsiders, even invaders. For years, they moved across the region, slowly settling, taking control of cities, and reshaping the political landscape. And one of those cities was Babylon. At the time, it was still small, still insignificant compared to its powerful neighbors. But that was about to change. An Amorite leader named Sumu-Abum took control of the city and founded what would become the first Babylonian dynasty. He didn't inherit a great empire. He built one from almost nothing. First, he secured the city itself, strengthening its defenses, building walls, digging canals to control water and support agriculture. Then, he began to expand. Step by step, campaign by campaign, Sumu-Abum pushed outward, defeating nearby cities and forming alliances where it was. By the end of his rule, Babylon was no longer just another city. It was becoming a regional power. Not the strongest yet, but no longer invisible. And in a world filled with chaos, that was the first step toward greatness. But Babylon's true rise began with one man, Hammurabi. He wasn't the first king of Babylon, but he was the one who changed everything. When Hammurabi came to power, Babylon was still not the strongest kingdom in Mesopotamia. Powerful rivals surrounded it, cities like Larsa, Eshnunna, and the rising forces in the north. At first, Hammurabi didn't rush into war. Instead, he focused on something far more important: stability. He, the city, restored temples, improved infrastructure, and made sure his kingdom was strong from within. While others fought endlessly, he prepared. And then he waited. Years passed. Alliances shifted. Enemies weakened each other. And when the moment was right, Hammurabi struck. One by one, he defeated his rivals. Eshnunna fell. Elam was crushed. Larsa, his most powerful opponent, was finally taken after a long campaign. By the end of his reign, Hammurabi had done what no one else could. He unified almost all of Mesopotamia under one rule. Babylon was no longer just a city. It was the center of a new empire. But Hammurabi's legacy wasn't built on conquest alone. It was built on law. For the first time in history, rules were written down clearly, not just for the powerful but for everyone. His famous code of laws defined justice in a way the world had never seen before. Strict, unforgiving, but structured, a system where order replaced chaos, and where even a king was expected to rule by law. Hammurabi didn't just build an empire. He built a system, a society where every person had a place, and every action had a consequence. Babylonian society was divided into three main groups: At the top were free citizens, known as Awilam. These were landowners, families, people who lived in communities and had full legal rights. Below them were the Mushkinim. They were dependents, people who served the state, the palace, or the temples. Some were officials, craftsmen, or administrators. They had rights, but not the same protections as free citizens. And at the bottom were slaves. Some were prisoners of war. Others had fallen into slavery through debt or punishment. In the eyes of the law, they were considered property. But what truly defined Babylon wasn't just its social structure. It was its laws. Hammurabi's code was built on a simple idea. Justice must be visible, clear, and unavoidable. The principle was harsh, an eye for an eye, but it wasn't equal for everyone. Punishment depended on who you were. The same crime could lead to very different outcomes depending on your status. And yet, for its time, this system was revolutionary, because it protected the weak from the strong, at least in theory. It regulated trade, defined contracts, controlled prices, and even governed family life. Women, for example, had rights that would not exist in many parts of the world for thousands of years. They could own property, go to court, demand divorce under certain conditions. A husband could not simply abandon his wife, especially if she was ill, and children had protected inheritance rights. This wasn't a perfect system. It was strict, sometimes brutal, but it was structured. And in a world filled with chaos, that structure made Babylon different from everything around it. But no empire lasts forever. After the death of Hammurabi, Babylon began to weaken. The system he built was strong, but without him, it started to fall apart. Over the next centuries, the balance of power shifted again. New kingdoms rose, old enemies returned, and among them, one would become Babylon's greatest threat: Syria. A kingdom to the north, known for its discipline, its military strength, and its brutality. For generations, Babylon and Assyria struggled for control over Mesopotamia. Sometimes allies, more often enemies, but eventually, Assyria gained the upper hand. Babylon fell under its influence. And with every passing year, tension inside the city grew. Rebellions broke out again and again. Babylon refused to accept rule. And then came the moment that changed everything. The Assyrian king, Sennacherib. At first, he tried to control Babylon through local rulers. But the city kept resisting, so he made a decision, a brutal one. In 689 BCE, Sennacherib ordered the complete destruction of Babylon. The city was looted, its temples were torn down, its walls destroyed, and, according to ancient sources, even its ruins were flooded, as if to erase it completely from the earth. Babylon was gone. But what happened next made the story even more powerful. Because sometimes destroying a city only turns it into a legend. But Babylon did not stay in ruins. Not for long. After the fall of Assyria, a new force began to rise from within Mesopotamia itself. A man named Nabopolassar. He wasn't born a great king. He was a rebel, a leader who saw an opportunity in the collapse of Assyrian power and took it. Step by step, he pushed back against Assyrian control, reclaiming city after city. And in 612 BCE, together with his allies, he brought down Nineveh, the heart of the Assyrian Empire. For the first time in generations, Babylon was free, but its greatest moment was still ahead. That moment came with his son, Nebuchadnezzar II. Under his rule, Babylon transformed into something the ancient world had never seen before. This was not just a city anymore. It was a statement. Massive double walls surrounded it, so wide that chariots could ride across the top. Palaces rose above the skyline. Temples reached toward the sky. And at the heart of it all stood structures that would become legend. The Ishtar Gate, covered in deep blue glazed bricks, shining like stone under the sun. The great ziggurat Etemenanki, believed by many to be the inspiration behind the Tower of Babel. And somewhere within the city, the Hanging Gardens. A wonder so extraordinary that even today, we are not entirely sure if they truly existed. Some say they were built for his wife to recreate the green mountains she missed. Others believe they were only a story, but that's what Babylon had become, a place where reality and myth were impossible to separate. At its peak, the city may have held over 200,000 people, one of the largest cities the world had ever seen. For a brief moment in history, Babylon was the center of everything. But even legends come to an end. In 539 BCE, a new empire appeared on the horizon. The Persians, led by Cyrus the Great, marched toward Babylon. The city, once mighty, now struggled to maintain its independence. Despite its walls, its canals, its history, Babylon could not resist the Persian forces. The gates opened, almost without a fight. Some say it was strategy, others betrayal. Babylon fell. The power of its kings, the glory of its walls, the wonder of its gardens, all became history. Yet the story of Babylon did not die. It lived in the memory of people, in the myths of poets, in the tales told across generations. A city that rose from small beginnings became the center of the ancient world, faced destruction, and yet became immortal in legend. Babylon, a name that echoes through time, a story that still inspires awe, a legend before it was even built and forever after.